Hey, welcome back to Married with Kids, a show helping you become a better parent and a better spouse one step at a time. I'm Mark Brewer. I'm your host, and I have with me my co-host today, as always, Andrea Lathrop.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone. Good to be with
Hi.
you.
You're still in Florida.
I'm still in Florida.
Well, we're ready for you to be in Dallas. That's public, right? I'm not messing anything up.
It's public now.
Oh,
Yes,
oh
it's
gosh.
public.
I always get nervous like I'm going to say something that I'm not supposed to say, but everybody already knows. So, and if
Yes.
you didn't, well, they're coming to Dallas to
Yeah.
hang out with old friends. Hey, guess what? Today we're talking not about parenting, although it's part of marriage, but we're going to talk specifically about some marriage stuff today. And we've got a great guest with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I was just thinking, all of us have this perception before we get married, and then things become more clear after the wedding ceremony, the honeymoon, we get into regular life. About how long after you guys got married did you start seeing some of these new to you behaviors in your spouse, Justin Lathrop?
Um, about almost immediately when we got home, I think, from the honeymoon. What's so funny when I think about it is how Justin has a reputation for his early to bed uh,
Mm-hmm.
values. But when we were dating and engaged, I never experienced that. Like, he was willing to stay up and out, like hang out with me, hang out with our friends, all through that experience.
Yes, he's very much into sacrifice. That's
Yes.
what I'm
And
hearing.
then we get home from our honeymoon, and I'll never forget being in our new apartment, and it had 2 floors. And I was like, after dinner, we'd like cleaned up and I'm sitting downstairs, and thinking, now he's going to come sit with me and we're going to probably talk and, like,
Right.
debrief
About this
our
new
days,
place,
and
and
yes,
yeah,
and just
hey, our new life together.
a thousand things to talk about.
But it didn't happen like
And
that.
out of the corner of my eye, I kind of see him quietly like walk past to the stairs, and he gets like 3 stairs, like steps up, and I'm like, hey, like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm I was just gonna go upstairs to bed. I was like, oh, it's like 8:45. And he's like, yeah, I know, and then, like,
Right.
I didn't know what to say. I was devastated. I was like, wow, like, came, saw, captured, it's over.
I've always known that about him. Now, I didn't know that the first night that I spent at y'all's house when I came to visit in
I
Minnesota
remember
that
that.
time. And we stayed up so late. And I was used to going to bed by about 10 because I had like boot camps that I ran at 5 in the morning and stuff. And I cannot remember how late we stayed up, but it was late. And I remember us just sitting the next morning and talking, and then come to find out he had wanted to go to bed probably at 8:30 or 9, and I wanted to go to bed at 8:30 or 9, but we didn't know each other well enough to say, "Hey man, I'll see you." He didn't feel the comfort level that he felt with you when y'all got back from your honeymoon as just kind of heading to the stairs. He just kept going and going and going, and I was like, "Okay, well, I'll just keep going cuz I don't want to be the punk." So, yeah. I've always loved that about him. That's why he and I are really good friends. We don't actually even have to talk. We can just get in the room and just lay on the couch and not even say a word, and we're totally cool on it. I remember one of the things that I got to do is be around Melanie's family for about 4 years before we ever started dating, and I saw how powerful she was with this pile and purge cycle. So she could build up piles of things in her room. And then I honestly, I don't know that I ever saw the purge cycle either before we were dating or even while we were dating. But like just in my mind, I thought that,
Sure.
if we were married, eventually it would happen. But she carried that over into our relationship. And actually, my son Mason has that gift as well, where she can just pile stuff up. And whether it's toiletries or it's clothing or it's dishes or cups, somehow she has a real skill. And then eventually, somewhere down the line, she's going to purge. But her purge cycles were always way later than when I wanted them to be. And so, yeah, I had to kind of learn how to navigate through that because I'd never seen that cycle so powerfully exercised. But you know what? Eventually, it gave me an opportunity to do something that was always very meaningful for her, where when she would pile the closet up, she'd be gone one day or at work or something, and I'd go in and spend 3 or 4 hours and just have it immaculate, everything color coded and in the right place. And it was always good for, a little bit of hand holding, a little huggy later on when I did that. What about arguments? Did y'all have? Can you remember your first arguments or petty arguments?
Still waiting on that first argument.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no.
Interesting.
Joking. Yeah, I'd say our early days of arguing were probably around like jealousy things.
He was really jealous. He was a jealous person.
No, unfortunately, that was more me. And so I have a couple of memories of that. I remember one time he made a comment about a Christian music, like young adult, famous person.
Who
at
was
the
it?
time, back in the, I think,
Like a
I think
woman?
her name was like Jennifer Knapp or something, like
Oh.
way back in, this is like the late 90s. And anyway,
Like he said, she's good looking or something? Like what did he
she's
say?
awesome,
Oh.
kind of thing. And, or like, I really liked her music and, and like, or kind of like the celebrity crush thing. And
So it wasn't even like, wow, look at the good body she's got. It was more like, I like her music.
yeah, it was more innocent than that. But I couldn't let it go. And I kept like asking him questions. And it's like, I think now I'm like, it was so ridiculous. I mean, I probably ignored him for, a couple of days and had to,
Wow.
go hold on him to just help him learn.
Well, he needed to learn. Don't say that you like that woman's music or it could go badly for you for a week.
Somehow that took something away from me. And it just was a symptom, of my insecurities at the time. So it was just a little painful, those early days. What about you guys?
Well, there were so many. Listen, I don't know why we would turn stupid things into full-blown wars, but there's one that stands out that if you ever say to Melanie, hey, you remember that time when the fork fell? She'll know what you're talking about. And for some reason, I remember in our first apartment, the fork fell off of the counter onto the floor. I do not know why that started a firestorm, but it was like everything hit the fan for the next 5 days. And we lived in a really small apartment, it's probably like 500 or 600 square feet. And we ignored each other for 4 or 5 days. And it's hard to ignore someone.
Yes, that's a lot of.
Oh my gosh, we were so
spaces.
powerful. We were very powerful in the ignoring game back in those days. But we couldn't remember them and have never been able to recall what it was that was the behind the scenes story of why that fork falling caused such a big problem. But it was just a petty thing that ended up being, so gigantic. And we've learned a lot of lessons over the years in trying to figure out how to navigate conversations, and that new revelations come after the kind of rose-colored glasses of the beginning of the relationship. You do start seeing some stuff later that maybe you just didn't notice or that you had an easier time overlooking. So I'm excited about our guest who's coming up next. And Brenda Elledge, our friend for many years, and she's going to come and share some insights around these types of situations in marriage. So here she comes.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Married with Kids. You can find more information on today's guest in the show description. And if you want to stay up to date of episode releases and new information, make sure to click that subscribe button on our podcast or YouTube page. And now, back to Married with Kids.
Brenda Elledge, it's so fun to have you with us today. You have been a really good friend to Mark and I for a lot of years, and have been a licensed professional counselor for a lot of years too, right?
Yes, many years, yes.
Okay, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you.
It is great to have you, and this is our very first time to ever do a podcast together.
Yes, it is.
So I'm
So
excited.
exciting.
You're very knowledgeable and smart,
Well, we'll
and
see.
you're going to fix a lot of people today.
Yes, well.
Help us,
yes,
Brenda.
We'll see about that too.
We were talking ahead of time. One of the craziest dynamics, and we hear people talk about how love is blind and how a lot of times in the pre-marriage relationship or the lead up to the wedding, somehow you just don't recognize or see some of the tendencies or behaviors
Right.
of your spouse until after the honeymoon, and you start having to live together, and all of a sudden they start
Sure.
coming up.
Yeah.
Is love really blinding us in those moments, or what's happening in that particular season?
Well, I think there's different theories about what's going on. I mean, for some people, they're saying it's a lot of chemicals that, it's our brain and we're needing to have this connection. And so we have these feel good chemicals that are just rushing through our body and our brain
So it's
that
not my
help
fault.
us.
It's not my fault.
Some of it's normal and natural, right? We need to not see everybody's warts and all, or who would get together. I don't know.
Okay.
So in some ways it helps us to connect and to have those good feelings towards somebody that we want to commit and then be with them. But that's not sustainable long term, right? I mean, you do have the good feelings, but then that's where it moves into the real commitment despite the warts. But yeah, so some of that is natural that you do look over some of it.
So it's pretty typical. I don't know for sure that I've ever heard anybody say what you just described as, you know what, those chemicals are there to help you not see everything, or you might not ever get together. That was interesting. And it's so true. I think about that. Well, okay, yeah, no, Melanie probably, having had seen all of the things, she probably would have said, and for those reasons, I'm out. She would have pulled the Shark Tank, I'm out of this deal a little bit earlier.
Yeah, well, I mean, you do have to think about it. I mean, we get, some of us, I'm going to say we, okay, we can get easily annoyed, or we can get easily irritated. I mean, think how quickly that happens when you're at Walmart or Target or something.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly we need something that helps us get past that so that we can move into deeper relationships. So I think in some ways, like I said, those chemicals are good. They're helpful for us, but they do wear off. That's kind of that infatuation stage that you hear people talk about.
Yeah.
And so it does last for a while, and it can last for like a year or 18 months. So then, yes, it does start to wear off, and then you deal with the stuff you may not have seen.
Okay, so, yeah, I've heard the scripture tells us, the Bible says that love covers over a multitude of sins. So later it actually, I guess, becomes more work and more skill set, where the love that you have for a person starts helping you get through those things that now, for whatever reason, you're able to see.
Right. Well, and it's love too, because
Yeah.
also it's not the infatuation part either. So it really is that deep,
okay.
committed love that does that.
Andrea, I know you and Justin, your husband, have never had any of these problems.
Right. Actually, we definitely have. And I think a question I have for you, Brenda, is, okay, so when the infatuation period kind of wears off and you're into this next season of commitment and kind of working through some things, when you really see the world differently, or you're kind of at an impasse, or you see this situation differently, and it's hard, like, how do you figure out who needs to change and kind of who's at fault,
Yeah.
that sort of thing?
Wait, you just used the fault word?
Right.
Well, I didn't mean, I was saying it to be a little,
No, it's
sassy,
okay. I'm
but
ready. Let's
yeah.
go.
Okay. Well, it's always the husband.
Oh,
Okay, no. For real, I'm joking.
Okay,
joking.
good.
No, we settled it. No.
You just totally divided the crowd right there in one statement.
I'm really, really joking about that. No, because it may not be that it's one person, right? I mean, because a lot of times it's both of us. We're both contributing to whatever is going on. And even if somebody is a little bit more glaring, right? And there is something that if we were divided up into a pie, 90% of the pie is that person, I still got to look at my 10%. So no matter what, there's still something that I can work on in the midst of that.
Okay, so if I'm saying that's true, that whole contribution thing is kind of, I don't think a lot of people think in those terms.
Okay.
So if that's true, then like how in the world do you get to some skill set or some way of operating where you can go, yeah, it may be that my contribution is only 10%, but it's still 10% and it's making up part of this pie. How do you deal with that? How do you get to that place where you can, or what's the skill or what's a tactic or a trick to help all of us go, okay, I don't like the fact that it's not that person's fault, but if I can buy into, I have a contribution, how do you get there?
Yeah.
What do you do with it?
Well, sometimes when I'm working, like specifically if I'm working with a client or I'm talking about them, they'll want to say how much the other person needs to change and what they need to do.
Like, that's the way I always feel.
Sure.
Boy, if they get their crap together, we could really make,
Things
then
would
I'd
be
have room to
amazing.
get this thing that is my little piece together.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, they're probably valid. There might be something that really is an issue that this person needs to deal with. But sometimes in my way of working with them, I say, have you ever thought about when you maybe you get on an elevator or you're in line, and especially now during the Corona time, if you stand too close to somebody, what do they do? If you're in their bubble, they move. So we can have influence and we can affect change just by us doing something different. So even if that person is not willing to look at their glaring issue or look at their thing they need to change, by me doing something, I can have some influence. And that's why I try to tell people, it may feel like you're not doing anything, but you are. There's still something that person can respond differently to. So my part might be very actively praying. I mean, obviously I believe in that. So very actively praying for them and very actively praying for me. What do I need to see about myself? What do I need to see about how I'm responding? What is my face doing? I mean, early on, so I'm going to tell on myself. So early on, I
This
think.
is good. I was about to ask you, could you
I'll tell on you.
get past the LPC and just your own experience?
So I don't know if Philip and I were married or dating or engaged. I can't remember. But he and my best friend Sharon, that you guys know, they sat me down and they did a little intervention. And they said, hey, we love you
Wait, the counselor got intervened on?
Yes.
This is awesome.
They said, we love you so much. But you don't realize that you have this face that you do that really sends a message to us that you are stupid. Like that when you're talking to us that we're stupid. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I love you guys. I never want to send that face that I think you're stupid. I didn't know. And it was hard to receive, very hard to receive because, it was hard to receive.
Did you find your blood, did you find like some adrenaline rush happening there?
Probably. But it was so good. And then we took that into our marriage because sometimes Philip would then look at me and he would say it nicely. He was like, say, hey, that's not the face I married. And it really helped me to realize, oh, I'm doing it. Like I'm doing it. I didn't know. So I share this a lot of times in premarital when I'm teaching classes, to students. And I say that if you can be willing to see what part is mine. Okay. So that's what I had to do. And it was hard. I didn't like it, but I could work on that and change. So then when I needed to bring up an issue to Philip or anybody, I was aware that I needed to watch my face and usually my tone, because then it was much easier for them to receive that. Did they always receive it?
Wow.
No. Could I control whether they received it? No. But that was my part. That's my part of the pie.
And he was confident that you were owning your part regardless of how big it was. So when he gets used to you owning your part, it's not like you're coming at him.
Yeah.
Dude, that's so innovative.
Yeah.
Why aren't we all doing that every second? You just changed my life again.
Yeah. There you go.
Wow.
So is there a time where it is appropriate? Like I think you had just mentioned it, whatever the other person has, the 60%, is it like you should just always focus only on your piece of the pie? Or is there a time that you would address the other person's behaviors or, and how would you do that without being confrontational and, not, losing focus on your own
Right.
piece of it?
Right. So I think obviously, when we're in relationship with somebody, we need to be able to tell them how they're impacting us. And so I think the key to what you're saying, not being confrontational, is how we're wording it, how we're trying to come across that when this happens, I feel this way, or when this behavior is done, this is how it impacts me. If we start off with kind of, I tell people if you can kind of get your finger up and you start doing this, it's probably not going to go well.
What, the finger trick doesn't work?
No, it doesn't.
Golly.
Gotta pull that finger back.
All
But
my tricks are like,
know,
my whole bag of tricks is getting dismantled right now.
pull the finger back. Because if you're talking like that, where you could almost do it, then it's not going to be received. Because it's very blaming, right? It's all about you. You're doing it wrong. And even if they are, they're just not going to receive it. So yes, you need to bring it up. You absolutely need to bring it up. Because I can't be in real good, intimate relationship with you if I'm not bringing that up. Because I will hold that. That will get in the way of our relationship.
Hey,
Not
pick
everybody's going to
something-
receive it, but you try.
Pick something spicy. So Brenda, pick a spicy moment of, hey, we need to get clear on this that you've experienced, either you and Philip or in your practice.
Okay.
And like say what you would say to kind of land the beginning of that conversation.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think people talk about money being a big issue. And usually couples have a different way of handling money. A lot of times they may be on the same page in some ways, but right, they do some things differently. So maybe one person is super spendy and that causes a lot of conflicts. So what?
I'm just laughing. I've never heard it called super spendy before.
So they're super spendy and the other person
Yes.
doesn't like it. So they've had this conversation before. I think the way to say that is the fact that it really, I need to talk with you because I love you, because when this happens, I feel so disrespected, or I feel like what I'm saying doesn't matter to you. That hurts so much that then it's hard for me to feel close to you. Because I mean, it's all about being close and being emotionally connected, right? And being in this good relationship. So if something's getting in the way of that, that's why we need to address it. Not because you're wrong, not because you're wrong, is because it's getting in the way of our relationship. So that's how I would approach it. That I love you, I care about you, I want to be close to you. When this keeps happening, I don't feel that way.
We'll be right back with today's episode of Married with Kids. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. If you have a topic or question you'd like us to address in the show, you can submit that by clicking the link in the show description. And don't forget, every submission is an entry into our weekly giveaway, so click that link and tell us what you think.
Andrea, have you ever tried to on-ramp a conversation with my friend Justin, whom you're married to, and your first attempt didn't land? And then I see you just kind of lightly shaking your head. Has that ever happened with you guys?
Mark, of course it's happened.
Okay,
so
good.
many times.
I know. I was doing it kind of set up because I wanted to hear Brenda share with us a little bit. So if you try to do it, and you try to do it, and let's say you actually do it in an appropriate way as you just described, but it does not land, what's our next recourse? Like, where do we go from here?
Well, you tried. You can't control what the other person does. But this is really impacting your marriage, really impacting your life, and maybe impacting daily how your family's going. I get that. That's real. I mean, we work with people in that situation all the time. So again, I think that's where you can continue doing your praying. You're doing what you can do. And if it doesn't resolve, I would try to get in some extra help with that. I'm not saying it always has to be counseling, professionally, but it might be that we join a Dave Ramsey class, because maybe it's not going to be me that's the one that's saying it, that they hear. Maybe there's some other resource, the podcast that people are doing, the other right now media things that we're watching together, that we're finding some resource that maybe they're saying the same thing, but the person at that point might receive it from them.
Gosh, this is so good. Andrea, how come we didn't have any of this when we all got married? We needed it, didn't we? It's like we're the but for grace, go I type relationships where nobody told us any of these great truth bombs ahead of time. And so we just had to make it through and finally get to this podcast to go, yes, that's it. Hey, this has been so helpful. If you could say, I got 1 minute and I could share anything with this audience around this subject of, hey, things looked a little bit differently, or I saw some things later on that I didn't see in the beginning of our relationship, and you had 60 seconds to just encourage people or say, hey, here's your next steps, what would you say?
Yeah, I think really key is being able to look at me, really being able to look at myself. I still do that. I still pray and I ask the Lord, what is it that I need to be working on? What do I need to change? Search me, know me. Because I just posted about it this morning on my Instagram, I have blind spots. So if I can start taking care of my blind spots, I guarantee you in some way, small or large, that other person will have to shift in some way. So even if you do it at first for a selfish reason, because you want them to shift,
sure,
it will work. It will work, and God will honor that, and He will help you, and then hopefully begin able to work in that other person as well.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much for being
You're
here with us
welcome.
today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Very, very meaningful. We love you, and it's
Love
fun
you
being
guys.
friends all these years, and especially learning today.
Thank you.